Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucy, and I'm a sustainability consultant at Turner Townsend. We're joined today by Richard Miller from Miller Klein Associates. The purpose of this event is it's a retrofit information support and expertise event that stands for RISE, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, delivered by Turner and Townsend. I will now hand over to Richard to start today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Lucy, and welcome everybody and good afternoon. So what we're going to be talking about today is stakeholder buy-in, both building it and sustaining it throughout the project. It's kind of a really important topic. And the way we're going to cover it, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge of buy-in and alignment, why you need to do it, the issue of constantly reinforcing the project goals and the plan, and a framework for telling the story. And that's kind of where we're going to focus in the second half. So set out the framework. And then in the second part, I'm going to do a deep dive into tools and techniques to help you construct and tell your story effectively. So that's how we'll do it. Okay, so why do we need to constantly work on stakeholder building and alignment? Because surely, once we've got project approval, we're golden. We have a plan, it's been approved, and now it's just a matter of execution. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. We need to work constantly on communications in order to hold the project together and to keep it functioning. Teams rarely last for long. People are always coming and going, joining the team, leaving the team, moving to different responsibilities. And that's true of your suppliers and contractors as well. And all of that adds to the risk for the project. It creates risks that you need to manage. People coming in don't necessarily know what's going on, don't know the history, don't know why you've made the decisions that have already been made. People leaving may be taking critical information with them, how we do things around there, that relationship I have with that particular supplier. So coping with teams that flex, in a project that may be lasting 2 or 3 years, it's very common to have quite substantial turnover of staff. So again, telling the story effectively, keeping the alignment, keeping the buy-in is a critical part of delivering the project. Another problem that occurs is as people get into their tasks in the project, they get their heads down, focus on their particular responsibilities, and they stop paying attention to the rest of the project. They get kind of tunnel vision. And what can then happen is groups and individuals start spinning off in all directions. You need to keep people together and aligned, all pulling in the same direction. If there's no communication, or if the communication is weak, that is really hard to do, because inevitably you've got a group of complex project, multiple groups of people, you're responsible for this bit, somebody else is responsible for that bit. Once people have been given that responsibility, that's the only thing in their vision. They get their head down and they focus on it. And so somebody needs to be thinking about the totality of the project and keeping everybody aligned, keeping everybody clear. And that means keep reminding people of the project goal, what we set out to do. Even though you may be down in the weeds dealing with today's crisis, it's vitally important that everybody still knows where we're going, what we're trying to achieve. And this is a comment made to me by a CEO of a company who was engaged in a major transformation project, big change management. This was about restructuring the way the manufacturing units worked with the sales units and how the entire global organization was structured. And I thought this quote was so apposite. When you have told the story so many times that you just can't bear to do it again, you have just begun to communicate. And I worked with this guy and watched him over 2 years telling the same story relentlessly with every group of people he met. Not kind of the whole story, but just like, remember what we set out to do? Well, today's problem is, or we're making great progress here. Always telling the story and always linking it back to the overall goal. Now, of course, you do have to start with commitment from your senior team, right? Someone's got to sign off the project. Someone's got to make sure that the funding is available and that the organization is committed. And to get senior buy-in, you must tell a convincing story about the project. Facts and projections on their own are not enough. The numbers in your spreadsheets, the numbers in your business case are not enough. People need to feel the importance of the project. You're selling to a bunch of experienced people with different backgrounds, approaches, and responsibilities, and you need to make the project relevant to each one of them. You have to be able to connect with them in written argument and in presentations. And they have a lot going on. You will have to fight for mind space. You need to show that this is a priority for them. And particularly when dealing with that critical senior management group, you need to begin warming them up early. Most executives don't like to be suddenly confronted with a project and bounced into a decision. Your chances of success are greater if they've seen the idea grow over time. And even better if they contributed to the idea, so they've seen their own thoughts and ideas and words coming back to them. The fundamental rule with those senior teams that you need support from is no surprises. Tell a little story. I once made the mistake of, in a company I was a board member of presenting a new idea at the board meeting because there was an opportunity. I was giving an update on something, and I just threw in some other thoughts that I had about how we could operate more effectively. And the CEO called me into his office immediately afterward, and he was furious with me. Don't you ever do that again. He said the point of a public board meeting is to ratify the decisions already made, not to actually argue the decisions. Now, that's a slightly cynical position, but it stuck with me. Don't surprise people. Don't take them unawares. Make sure your ideas are pre-briefed. It really helps. And one of the reasons it really helps is these words from the best chief financial officer I ever worked with. Return on investment calculations never persuaded a board to do what they didn't want to do or persuaded them not to do what they wanted to. Decisions aren't only rational and logical. In fact, sometimes decisions are downright irrational and illogical. That doesn't necessarily make them wrong. Your job is to understand these executives, what they worry about, and to show them how this project solves problems for them and helps them to meet their objectives. By explaining the project in their terms, not yours, you can ease it up their priority list. And I'm just talking a little bit about the senior management team at this stage. This applies to all of your key stakeholder groups. They're all busy doing other things. They all have other concerns. You need to make this project important to them. And so this is a framework for developing and using your story to get commitment and to maintain alignment. So to create a compelling story, you must be clear on what the project will deliver, why it is important to the organization or to the stakeholder group, and how you will deliver it. And if any of you were in last week's session on building the business case, that's your business case, the what, the why, and how of the project. You must make sure you've got that clear because those are the building blocks that you're going to use to influence everybody else. And then there's a question of alignment. Your story needs to show that the project aligns with the goals and needs of the organization and the important stakeholders. And those may be internal to the organization, corporate strategy. They may be external forces, trends and drivers. And they may be based on the wants and needs of specific individuals, teams, or groups of stakeholders. And so you have to take your story and figure out how to align it with the interests of all those groups. And then you have to be able to tell the story. Once you have that story well aligned with the organization's goals and needs, you need to tell it effectively. And that's about reducing the complexity of your story, having the ability to adapt it to different audiences, and then using the story to convince. And this is the framework which we'll pull apart in the next section when we begin to deal with some of the tools and techniques you might use. So the key points out of this section are you have a need to get commitment from all the stakeholder groups. And I mean all the stakeholder groups who can influence the project. That includes your tenants, that includes your contractors, that includes the people providing the funding. That includes the teams within your organization. Having a project plan, having it rubber stamped by the top executives or by whoever's making the decision is not enough. You still have to sell that project to all the groups you need. And once you get into the project, even if you get their commitment at the beginning, project focus will dissipate. People get their heads down, they're down in the weeds, they're dealing with today's crisis, something has come out of the left field in their department that suddenly they have to deal with. The focus will dissipate. You cannot rely on everybody keeping to the same project. And I have come across projects where there was a clear project plan, everybody agreed, everybody was aligned at the beginning, and they didn't bother to keep the communications between the various subgroups. And what happened was practical decisions were made about, oh, we can save a bit of time if we do this way. Oh, we can save some money, we can provide some extra benefits. Practical decisions that were within their area of responsibility, but actually meant that the project couldn't be pulled together at the end. It no longer fitted. The bits were now from different jigsaw puzzles and you couldn't reconnect it. So you need to think about that project focus dissipating and how you're going to keep everybody aligned. So keeping everyone aligned is critical. You must communicate relentlessly. It's something which you can get bored of. People can get fed up hearing from you. It's still important. Make the project story clear, and that starts with you clearly understanding the project. Then you can tell it to the different stakeholder groups, making sure you're feeding the right information to them. And then you need to think about telling that story effectively, because don't forget you're going to be telling the story over and over again. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to get these ideas across? So let's kind of break this framework apart and think about the individual parts. The what, why, and how. If you've attended the business case session last week or a previous one, this is the model we use in Turner & Townsend for thinking about the totality of the business case, all of the things you need to know in order to plan and execute a project. So what are the planned outcomes? If you achieve those outcomes, what would the benefits be and who gets those? Are they purely financial benefits, or are there knock-on benefits in health and social benefits? What actions are you going to undertake to deliver those outcomes and reap those benefits? What's your delivery plan for doing it? Obviously, what's it going to cost? How are we going to finance that? What resources are we going to need? And how are we going to procure that? And that all fits into the strategic purpose, why you're tackling this in the first place. And then there's this key element of risk management, which is often not done terribly well, but is vitally important to delivering projects as complicated as these. So these are boxes which contain questions to which at some point, not necessarily right at the beginning, you are going to have answers. And if you can get your project into a framework like this, then the question of what is the project and what's it supposed to deliver? Why are we doing it? Why does it matter? And how are we going to do it? They kind of fall out. And this becomes the building blocks, the Lego out of which you're going to construct your various stories. So those key parts of knowing what the story is, the what, the why, and the how, you really need to be on top of that. And of course, it evolves through the project. Those where we are on costs will change as you go into the project. The resources, all of these things are subject to change as you're going through the project in real life. So keeping on top of it, knowing what the story is, and being able to quote at a moment's notice, what are we setting out to do? Why is it important? And how are we going to do the next step, or how the overall project? Having that at your fingertips is really important. So that's the part about knowing your story. And it's very important because you're going to be competing with other priorities. In most organizations, there's all this other stuff going on as well. We've got to get our voids down. We've got some properties in desperate need of refurbishment right now. We've got this issue with the tenants. We've got that problem. People are facing these issues continuously. And so you have to be able, as was said by Pippa, you have to be able to integrate. You have to be able to show how your bit fits in. Yeah, don't attack the other priorities. It's not you or them necessarily. Maybe you can show how you can tackle them at the same time when you're doing the retrofit. So the retrofit becomes a vehicle for solving other problems as well. If you need to replace the boilers, getting insulation at the right at the same time makes the process cheaper and faster. Yeah, you're replacing the kitchen, as I said. Why not sort out the windows and insulation at the same time to cut time, reduce the mess and inconvenience? cut the costs, cut the time, make your tenants happier. So if at all possible, you want to kind of say, yeah, I know you're dealing with that issue. I know you got that priority. Let me help you. Here's a way we can make your task easier and get a better result. And one tool they constantly pick up on, the risk register, is a great summarizing tool for the project status. It lists what are the risks we face at the moment, how important are they, what's our mitigation plan, who's going to deal with it. It's a really powerful communication tool. And in many project frameworks, if you're getting funding from the UK government, for example, under one of these schemes, you have to have a risk register and you have to keep it up to date. Use it as a communications tool. It can be a one-page, this is where we are, this is what we're dealing with, just a reminder, A, B, and C are the key targets, and this is what we're doing about it. And oh, Fred, James, Lucy, where are we up to? What's happening? Have we solved that problem yet? So since you have to do it anyway, use it as a tool for communicating. So that's about what is the story in its totality. The next thing you have to do is you need to align it with various people. You need to find out what matters to the organization, the key individuals, the key stakeholder groups. So some topics will be internal to the organization, like the strategy. What is the published strategy of your organization? What have they said publicly? Right? What are they? Are they going for net zero? Have they declared a climate emergency? Is it about healthy buildings? Is it about economics? What is the language that they are using to describe the goals of the organization? And then you can just tweak, tell your story in a way that connects with that. Can you show that your project will help to deliver those strategic objectives? There can be external trends and drivers. Are there specific topics that they want to address? Perhaps fuel poverty is a big issue, or ill health caused by poor indoor air quality. Or are there new regulations or legal obligations coming in the next few years? What are the expectations on the quality of rentable properties in the next 5 years? Can the project that you're undertaking contribute to addressing these issues? The more you can make it connect with things that people already see on the horizon, the more logical and obvious it will be to do it. And then there are the needs of the various stakeholders. And I just picked an example. Here's one of your colleagues. You need their help to deliver your project, but he's already very busy. So how are you going to persuade him? How will your project make his life easier? A great way to sell any project of any kind is to show to the people you need to influence, this is going to make your life easier. This is going to simplify things for you. I know it looks like it's more work, but actually it's going to solve a bunch of problems for you. So we were talking about repairs and maintenance teams earlier. Do the retrofit right, the repairs and maintenance need goes down. If you've got a long-term plan for the property, so you know the sequence of upgrades that you intend to apply because you're using PAS 2035, you've got a whole house plan and you're going to be working through that over the coming years. That makes the job of the people, of your contractors, makes the job of your tenant communication team easier, because there's a clear plan you can show them, you can show the sequence, they can plan for it. So think about those needs of the different stakeholder groups who you need on side. And what you're ultimately planning to do, in telling the story effectively, you need to make sure that everyone is clear and remains clear throughout the project. You cannot over-communicate. It can feel like you're over-communicating, but it's really hard to do. So one of the things we talked about earlier on in the framework I gave you was simplifying the story. And a key communications idea is the elevator pitch. You probably heard the story somewhere. You have a great idea. You meet the CEO in the elevator. You have 20 seconds between floors to make your case. Not to cover all the detail, but to interest people. You get the chance for the detail later. What you're asking is permission to present the detail. You've got to grab their attention first. And marketers have an acronym for the journey you take a buyer on. AIDA, A-I-D-A. Attention, interest, desire, action. No attention and interest no action. So you need to be able to tell your story in a way that grabs people's attention, attracts their interest. Then you can work on the detail. So make the project meaningful to them, make it solve problems for them, make it help them meet their strategic objectives, and they will help you to deliver it. So to labor the point, communication is key. Develop your elevator pitch by communicating your project clearly and succinctly. And the language used can have a powerful impact. So different groups will expect different language. What language are you going to use with their tenants? Is it the same language you're going to use when you're talking to your suppliers? But always the same components. Cover the important stuff right at the beginning of any conversation or presentation, being very clear. The problem, the opportunity is, it is important because if only we could, it would solve this problem or create this opportunity. To do that, we need to be able to. For details, we'll get onto those later. And if you're always thinking, so if you need to be in a position where if somebody says, okay, what's this project all about? And you get a sense that you're walking down a corridor and you've got 30 seconds to do it. You can do it just as effectively as if you're given a 1-hour pitch with PowerPoint slides and all the rest of it. And one of the ways of doing this, of constructing your elevator pitch, is with what's called the inverted pyramid. This is a technique widely used in writing for the web and in journalism, and it builds from what's the critical information. You start with the core information with a few simple words, and then you introduce your main argument, and then you move on to further detail as required and as requested. So in a newspaper article, you have a headline, you have the key takeaways immediately under that, and then the main story. A journalist who did work on print newspapers talked about whether you were above the fold or below the fold. Right? So if it was above the fold, when they picked up the folding newspaper, they got all the key information, and then read more, turn the paper over and read below the fold. And the advantage of that is that the key points are communicated first, and then you can get into more detail. So this ability to expand and contract the story according to who you're talking to and when you're talking to them is very important. And that links back to the point I made earlier about really knowing your stuff, knowing where the project is, knowing the key points you need to make. You also need to adapt the message to your audience. And again, a technique from marketing is stakeholder mapping. Thinking about, well, who are my stakeholder groups? Who are the groups I need on side? Listing them exhaustively, thinking about them, thinking about those needs from the alignment section. Okay, my repairs and maintenance team, what are they worrying about? What are they thinking about? How can I help them succeed? What are they looking for? And then you can map stakeholder influence and stakeholder interest. If they are influential in the project, they have the capacity to accelerate it or slow it down, and they're really interested, then you need to actively engage with them. They're the people you need to be talking with regularly. If they're high influence, but this is really kind of not on their horizon for whatever reason, it may be the legal team has nothing to contribute to this. So they're very influential. They can really derail things, but they're not kind of going to be active in the project. You need to keep them satisfied. If it's high interest but low influence, you want to make sure they're informed. And if it's low influence, low interest, you just monitor and keep an eye on them. But if you think about, ask yourself the question, list the groups you need to address, influence, get on side. What do they need? What are they looking for? What are their concerns? That will really help you to adjust the story. Having that in the back of your mind when you're talking to any of those groups, you feed them the right information. And then talking to individuals, where they're coming from and how you might interact with them. This is a tool I've found immensely useful when trying to connect with and influence stakeholders. The advantage is it's not like Myers-Briggs or anything complicated. You don't need to give someone a test. You just listen to how they talk and watch them in action. And you classify people on two axes. Are they naturally ask lots of questions, or are they naturally tell, providing a lot of information? And are they emotionally open, wearing their hearts on their sleeves, or are they playing their cards close to their chests? And this gives you 4 crude categories, and they're usually called the analyticals, the drivers, the amiables, and the expressives. And you work with these people who think that way in different ways. They're also given other names. So they're also called thinkers, directors, owls, hawks, and so on. So you may see those around. But the key thing you're doing is if you respond to whether they're naturally ask or tell and whether they're open or closed, then you can tell the story in a way which will engage with them. So to give a specific example, analyticals, sponges for information. They're the guys who ask relentless question after question after question to make sure they've got it. They like to really chew over a problem. They like to inspect it from every conceivable angle in order to make sure they've understood it before they will act. If you're dealing with someone like that, you are going to have to feed them lots and lots of information, and you're going to get lots and lots of questions. Expressives, on the other hand, tell, and they are very open in their emotions. So they give information, they're less interested in receiving it. So I am a dyed-in-the-wool expressive, and the way to engage my attention is to say something like, just imagine if we could, right? I think I know a way in which we can take 25% out of our ongoing repairs and maintenance bill. Just imagine if we could, what that would enable us to do. So the dreaming, right? Drivers, another group, very clear. The people often called directors. A lot of top management are like this. I had a boss who used to say to me, stop wittering on. Just give me 3 options and a recommendation, and I will make the decision. Right? Don't want to know all the background. Just give me the critical facts and a recommendation. I will make the decision. He used to say, don't bring me a menu without a price list. That's what he was looking for. And, they will act instantly. They will make a decision. So if you know who you're talking to, you can adjust the way you're talking to them. And this is called the social styles matrix. It was developed quite some time ago, but I found it incredibly useful because you also recognize the challenges. As an expressive, I found working with analyticals incredibly difficult, right? Because they would just drive me mad with their questions and keep wanting to make absolutely sure they've got it clear. They made me do better work because they made me stop and think about what I was proposing and the implications. On the other hand, as an expressive, I helped the analyticals because I could make them stop at a sensible point and say, okay, now we need to make a decision. Let's go for it. Let's jump. We may not be ready, but let's jump. Because if we keep talking about it, we'll never get anywhere. So I find this a useful way to look at people when you're dealing with individuals. Can use it in a group. It's harder, but you can use it in a group as well by answering the questions from the different people in a slightly different way. So we've got the stakeholder mapping. Where are the groups coming from? How do we understand their interests, their wants? How can we align with them? And then we've got the social styles matrix, talking to individuals. One of the things that you're going to be doing is telling the story over and over again. And there are ways in which you can do that, which will help you to connect with people. It will come from your passion from the project, but it also comes from ideas like active listening. Now, active listening is something which has been developed over many years. It's used extensively in psychotherapy and things like that, but also in marketing and in selling. And it's very simple. So I have to worry about this because, as I said, I'm naturally a tell person. I will be in there sorting people's lives out immediately. I need to pull back. I need to listen to what they're saying. So active listening is about a way of questioning and a way of using the information you get. So you ask open questions. Well, what's it going to be, A or B? Is a closed question. It forces a yes/no answer. If you say, which of these solutions, how do you think these 2 solutions will affect the way you work in the future? That's an open question. That's allowing people to tell their story to you. So you listen to that, you feed it back to them. So, okay, so from what you've said, it sounds like, and you repeat back to them to check. And they can say, no, you haven't got it quite right. That's not right. What I meant was, or they can say, yeah, absolutely. And so you build up a picture. But instead of you thrusting information at them, you are gaining information from them and using it to make the project more effective. And in doing so, you're building that link where they will trust you, they will open up to you, and they will participate in your project. So again, there's loads of stuff about this on the internet. You can find all kinds of tools and support, but it's something I recommend you think about. And go back to the social styles matrix and check your own native position. Where do you sit? Yeah, if you're a deep analytical, maybe you just want to be careful about endlessly questioning people with what feels like to them the same point over and over again. But tell the story with passion, use active listening. You can actually get across to individuals and groups of people very, very well. So pulling that all together, it's about getting commitment from all the stakeholder groups and keeping that commitment and alignment throughout the project. That means communicating relentlessly. A good plan won't do it on its own. It's got to be sold to all these different people. And some of us kind of naturally want to say, well, here's the document, here's the plan, here's the application for the funding, here's the project objectives, that's it. Right? That rarely works. It's hard to do the first something like that, and it's hard to keep it up. So good plan won't do it on its own. You must sell it. You've got to fight for mind space, build momentum, connect with people's priorities, all the things we talked about. Know your project story. All right, you need it at your fingertips. And you can use things like the risk register as a communication tool to help you get the story across. And then connect with the priorities. Okay, so how does it connect with the organization strategy? How does it connect with the strategy of your key supplier, the people you utterly depend on? Right? Is this an important project for them, or is it way down the list? What are the risks to you of it being way down the list? Dealing with specific issues and drivers. Well, whatever we do, we're going to have to deliver EPCC. We have to deal with a set of properties where people are complaining about damp. Those specific issues and drivers, making sure you've got those and you can tell the story in a way that connects with them. And then the needs of those different groups. Your repairs and maintenance guy who's overwhelmed already. Your procurement team who you're asking to operate in a different way and they're uncomfortable about it. How can you help them to understand and show that you're going to help them? Distill your plan into an elevator pitch. Always have it in your back pocket. I've always said to people when helping them, if you cannot describe your project clearly, so it's absolutely clear what you're doing, what the benefits are going to be, who gets the benefits, how you're going to go about delivering it. If you cannot get that onto one page of A4, you have not understood your project. And then adjust the pitch to the audience. Recognize that these different stakeholder groups, these different key individuals are coming from a different place and want to be talked to in different ways. If you can, make sure that you're using their language, speaking to them the same way. As I said, you would not talk to your procurement department about the project in the same way that you would talk to your tenants team. And then keep telling the story. Keep telling the story till you're sick of it and keep telling the story. And use ideas like active listening to help you to engage with people and make sure that you're communicating. And there's all kinds of stuff in there that you can use. One colleague I work with used to talk about the words, the music, and the dance, and how people communicate. The words are the thing you would write down on a piece of paper. But when you're talking to people, that's only about 10, 12% of the communication. Then there's the music, how the exact words you use, the tone of your voice, how you express yourself. And then the dance, the physical experience, sitting with someone, being up on a stage, telling the story. If you're stiff and rigid or open and welcoming and bringing people in. This all sounds horribly political and marketing and maybe something you think this is not my job. But this is all important in selling a project and keeping everybody aligned through a project. So